Imagine waking up one morning and all of your Bitcoin is gone. That's exactly what happened in 2014 when Mt. Gox, a website that originally started as a place to trade Magic the Gathering online cards, collapsed after losing 850,000 Bitcoin. At the time, that was $450 million. Today, it will be worth over $80 billion. This wasn't just a hack. It was the moment Bitcoin faced its first true crisis. This is the story of Mt. Gox, the exchange that handled 3/4 of all Bitcoin on Earth until it didn't. But here's the twist that will make your head spin. The Bitcoin wasn't stolen all at once in some Ocean's 11 style heist. It was slowly drained over the years while everyone, customers, regulators, even the CEO had absolutely no idea it was happening. And when they finally figured it out, the CEO announced the collapse with a PDF statement and just walked away. Well, briefly, we'll get to that Tokyo jail cell later. Let's rewind to 2006. Jed McCaleb, an American programmer with a love for peer-to-peer technology, creates a website called Mt. Gox. What does Mt. Gox stand for? Magic the Gathering Online Exchange. Yes, you heard that right. The platform that would one day handle billions in Bitcoin transactions was originally meant for trading digital playing cards featuring wizards and dragons. But Jed had a revelation in 2010. Bitcoin, this weird new digital currency that barely anyone understood, needed a place where people could easily buy and sell it. So he did what any reasonable person would do. He repurposed his Magic card trading site into a Bitcoin exchange. And honestly, it kind of worked. Mt. Gox became the place to trade Bitcoin. Within months, it was handling thousands of transactions. Jed was riding high on his accidental success story. But here's where our first plot twist enters. At least 80,000 Bitcoin had been hacked before Karpeles even took over the company. And that initial cyber theft began a spiral of trouble that may have led directly to the firm's financial collapse. Yep, the platform had already been compromised and Jed either didn't know or didn't care enough to fix it properly. In March 2011, he decided running a Bitcoin exchange was too much work and sold it to a French software developer named Marc Karpeles. Enter Marc Karpeles, a pudgy, cat-loving programmer living in Tokyo who suddenly found himself running the world's largest Bitcoin exchange. Marc was brilliant with code, but had absolutely zero experience in finance, security, or really anything that would qualify you to handle hundreds of millions of dollars. Picture this, a guy who spent his free time posting cat photos on social media was now responsible for 70% of all Bitcoin transactions worldwide. What could possibly go wrong? Under Marc's leadership, by early 2014, Mt. Gox was handling over 70% of all Bitcoin transactions worldwide. The platform was processing millions in trades daily. Marc became a founding member of the Bitcoin Foundation. He was living in Tokyo, running this empire from what was essentially a makeshift office. But behind the scenes, the house was already on fire. Here's what nobody knew. Bitcoin was slowly disappearing, methodically, like someone had left a tiny hole in the world's largest piggy bank and was just waiting for it to drain. The hack, or series of hacks, exploited something called transaction malleability. Without getting too technical, imagine if you could photocopy a check, cash both the original and the copy, but make it look like you only cashed once. That's essentially what was happening. Hackers would withdraw Bitcoin, manipulate the transaction records to make it look like the withdrawal failed, then complain to Mt. Gox support that they never received their money. Mt. Gox would send the Bitcoin again. Rinse, repeat, steal hundreds of thousands of Bitcoin. And Marc, the platform's accounting was so bad that he couldn't tell the difference between actual Bitcoin and ledger entries. It was like trying to balance your checkbook if your checkbook was written in disappearing ink and also possibly on fire. By early 2014, customers started noticing problems. Withdrawals were delayed, support tickets went unanswered, people were getting nervous. But Marc kept insisting everything was fine. Technical difficulties, he said. We're working on it, he promised. Then came February 7th, 2014. Mt. Gox suddenly halted all Bitcoin withdrawals. The crypto community went into full panic mode. If Mt. Gox, the biggest, most trusted exchange, was having problems, what did that mean for Bitcoin itself? Was this the end? Had the whole experiment failed? Days passed, Marc stayed silent. The price of Bitcoin crashed. People were screaming for answers. Protesters even gathered outside Mt. Gox's Tokyo offices holding signs demanding their money back. And then on February 24th, 2014, Mt. Gox's website went completely dark. Just blank. Gone. No explanation, no warning, just a white screen where billions of dollars worth of Bitcoin used to be traded. Later that day, a document leaked. It was titled Crisis Strategy Draft, and it contained the most devastating sentence in Bitcoin history. At this point, 744,408 BTC are missing due to malleability-related theft, which went unnoticed for several years. Hackers had accessed and stolen 740,000 Bitcoin from Mt. Gox customers and 100,000 from the company itself, roughly the equivalent of $460 million at the time. 850,000 Bitcoin, just gone. Vanished into the digital ether, the equivalent of every person in San Francisco losing their entire life savings overnight. On February 28, 2014, Mt. Gox filed for bankruptcy protection in Japan. Mark Karpeles appeared at a press conference in Tokyo, bowed deeply in traditional Japanese apology fashion, and delivered the news that would define his life. The Bitcoin was gone, and he had no idea where it went. The Bitcoin community exploded. Some people lost hundreds of thousands of dollars. Others lost their entire net worth. And the worst part, many of them had been true believers, early adopters who had trusted Mt. Gox because it was the Bitcoin exchange. But wait, remember how I said this story has more twists than a pretzel factory? 10 days after announcing the loss of 850,000 Bitcoin, Mark made another announcement. Karpeles discovered around 200,000 forgotten Bitcoins on March 7, 2014. 10 days after announcing that Mt. Gox had lost nearly all of the 850,000 Bitcoins it held. You forgot about 200,000 Bitcoin? That's like losing your house and then remembering, oh yeah, I have a second mansion in the Bahamas that I completely forgot about. How do you forget 114 million? How does that even happen? It was sitting in an old digital wallet that nobody had checked, just sitting there, while the entire world was having a meltdown. The Japanese police were not amused. In August 2015, Mark Karpeles was arrested and spent nearly a year in a Tokyo jail. The charges, you might ask? Embezzlement and data manipulation. But here's where it gets interesting. Investigators couldn't actually prove that Mark stole the Bitcoin. The evidence suggested he was guilty of gross incompetence in terrible record keeping, but not necessarily theft. In 2017, a breakthrough. Greek police arrested the founder of BTCE at an American request. BTCE, a shady cryptocurrency exchange that was allegedly used to launder billions, including potentially Bitcoin stolen from Mt. Gox. The trail led through multiple countries and suggested that Mt. Gox's Bitcoin had been funneled through a massive criminal enterprise. This wasn't just a hack, it was potentially one of the largest money laundering operations in history. In 2019, Mark Karpeles was convicted, but only for falsifying financial records. The Japanese court found him not guilty of embezzlement. The judge essentially ruled that Mark was an incompetent CEO who had no idea his exchange was being robbed blind. And the victims? They're still waiting for their money. As of 2024, 10 years after the collapse, Mt. Gox finally began distributing some of the recovered Bitcoin to creditors. While nearly $6 billion worth of assets have been distributed earlier this year, Mt. Gox linked wallets still hold $2.7 billion of Bitcoin, and the repayment process has been extended with a deadline of October 31st, 2025. In hindsight, it almost feels like the longest, most painful hodl in crypto history. But here's the cruel irony. Even for those who are getting something back, it's only a fraction of what their Bitcoin would be worth today. Others may never see a full repayment at all. And while the legal process dragged on for more than a decade, those victims missed out on the chance to use or sell Bitcoin as it grew into a fortune, trapped instead in years of uncertainty and court battles. So what's the real story of Mt. Gox? Was Mark Karpeles a criminal mastermind who orchestrated the perfect crime? Or was he just a programmer who was hopelessly out of his depth? The evidence suggests the truth is somehow worse than either option. He was negligent. He built a financial empire on a foundation of Magic: The Gathering online card trading code and duct tape. He never properly audited the platform. He didn't notice Bitcoin disappearing for years. Mark Karpelès didn't steal the Bitcoin, but his incompetence created the perfect environment for someone else to do it. And in some ways that's even more terrifying, because it means the collapse of Mt. Gox wasn't some brilliant heist. It was a comedy of errors that cost real people hundreds of millions of dollars. Mt. Gox wasn't just Bitcoin's first major catastrophe. It was the moment cryptocurrency lost its innocence. Before Mt. Gox, people believed in the technology, the community, the dream of decentralized money. After Mt. Gox, everyone learned a painful lesson. Your Bitcoin is only as safe as the person holding it. The hack exposed vulnerability in the early crypto ecosystem. Poor security, no regulation, exchanges run by enthusiastic amateurs with no financial expertise. And a community so desperate for Bitcoin to succeed that they ignored every red flag. Today, Mark Karpelès lives in Tokyo, works as a blockchain consultant, and insists he was as much of a victim as anyone. And the stolen Bitcoin, most of it is still missing, probably sitting in wallets controlled by criminals who are too smart to ever move it. And somewhere in the world, there's a hard drive or paper wallet containing hundreds of thousands of Bitcoin that will never be recovered. It's the digital equivalent of buried treasure. Except nobody has the map, and digging it up might get you arrested in 3 different countries. What do you think, guys? Was Mark Karpelès the most incompetent CEO in history? Or was he playing the long game all along? And could something like Mt. Gox happen today? Drop your theories in the comments. And if you're running a Bitcoin exchange from your basement, maybe not. Stay tuned for our next episode of Crypto Uncovered, where we'll explore another scandal that proves the crypto world never runs out of ways to surprise us. And if this story has you questioning where to safely trade crypto, remember, the Mt. Gox collapse taught the industry painful but valuable lessons about security, transparency, and accountability. Before trusting any platform with your funds, verify they have proper security audits, insurance, and regulatory compliance. Learn about best practices for protecting your crypto at jucoin.com, where we believe the lessons of history shouldn't be repeated.